In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And a lot of weird shit. Roll to seize!
Welcome to Roll to Seize. This is episode 43. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host and Warhammer enthusiast, Andrew Dickinger.
Hello.
Andrew, we are back, fresh from Las Vegas Open.
Literally just back.
We flew in this morning. It's Sunday, actually. Right now, the first round of the final 8 is happening at this very moment.
Yep.
So if you were hoping we were going to recap the finale of the top 8, that's not what we're here to talk about. Today we're actually going to talk about kind of our experience at the LVO, what was revealed first from GW, which there were some exciting reveals there. Kind of our take on the current meta, because we got to slam up against quite a few different armies and takes. And then finally talk about, as always, our Seasons of the Month, because we definitely had some opportunities to screw up.
Since the finals are happening right now, we just want to give a shout out to our buddy Jeff Poole.
Jeff Poole!
Matching against the number one player in the tournament right now. Good luck, buddy.
Nick Nadavati. And, we're going to guess that Jeff is going to crush Nick Nadavati, of course.
And everyone
else. He's a hometown hero for us. Plays in Glendale's Game Empire, where we play our tournaments every month.
No pressure, Jeff.
No pressure, Jeff. You got this. At this point, you guys already know the results. So if Jeff won, obviously we called it right here from the beginning. If he lost, Jeff, what the hell, man? You dropped the ball for all of us.
We're going to have to talk about things.
So disappointing. I'm just kidding, man. Good luck. I am curious about what the results are going to be. I think both Andrew and I probably have what our predictions might be, but we'll get to that when we start talking about the meta. But let's kind of kick things off here and first talk about the reveals from Thursday night from GW.
Yeah, so there definitely was a lot. One that we were expecting to happen that didn't happen was the next Primarch reveal.
Yes.
But they did reveal a new Crypt deck model because the Necrons Codex is confirmed to be coming out
it's probably going to be
within the next 2 months.
Within the next 2 months, yeah. How they revealed the codexes at the presentation is they revealed Drukhari, then Tau, then Necrons, which means it'll probably go in that order.
Yeah,
it feels like
high probability, but Drukhari was confirmed to be next. They want to round out Eldar essentially.
Sorry, they haven't gotten their last bit of Eldar, which is the Harlequins, which I've heard that they might in fact be known as Harlequins going forward.
Harlequins with a Cockney accent is their new name.
Did you hear that, Harlequins? Did you hear it?
It's the Harlequins.
It's the Harlequins, eh? Right? All our fans from England, sorry for that.
Sorry. Terrible accents.
Accent.
We never claimed to be good at accents. Yeah. So obviously going forward, trying to trademark the different names for their armies, they're renaming
Makes sense.
things.
Orcs are probably going to be Oryx, which is a cool name.
Yes, I do like Orc from the Age of Sigmar line. But yeah, so they're
Necrons are going to be called a living computer box people, right?
I don't think they have
Necrons trademark.
They don't have a conflict there. But yeah, it was fully confirmed that Drukhari is next, and what they mentioned with Drukhari of them having not only their cabals, but also witch cults and the covens.
Yeah.
Like all of those having
have their own special stuff.
Chapter tactics type deal, which is very cool.
Really neat. And it makes sense too, because in the recent Thousand Sons Codex, which is coming out, there's a lot of talk of Ahriman from the Thousand Sons Codex going headstrong, going after Kamarag, or Kamora, as we've been told is probably how it's supposed to be pronounced. But listen, guys, we worked there. I think we would know, right? Right?
I mean, we could have just been pronouncing it wrong the whole time.
We probably were pronouncing it wrong, and nobody said anything.
Maybe that's why they put us in the torture box.
Oh, my God. That adds up, doesn't it? But yeah, so I think that makes sense narratively to continue that story into the next codex would be Drukhari.
Yeah, because especially since with Custodes and Thousand Sons having just dropped. And if they're continuing a storyline, we don't know what they're going to do with Tau, but they did mention that from their point of view...
They're getting a psyker. I'm kidding.
From their point of view, the more dramatic change for the army from Index was actually Necrons, not Tau. And
right.
they
Of those three, we asked at the panel because they did a Q&A at the end, and some really smart, clever guy,
not one of us,
asked that question. Who then that same guy also asked a very dumb question
Yes,
at
he
the
did.
end, and got smacked down hard from the leading panelists.
I mean, the salt was flying pretty early in that Q&A.
Andy was swinging that hammer hard for dumb questions.
Yes, but yeah, so they said that Necrons, the one thing they mentioned was them being very mobile now, which is it's almost like, okay, so they were very mobile in 5th, and then they were not very mobile in 6th and 7th, other than a few units.
In 8th, they've got some mobility tricks. They can do their Veil of Darkness, which they can teleport a unit with the guy. They can do the redeploy kind of with the kind of a second version of Infiltrate with the Deceiver. He's got like kind of this like pull everybody off the table and put them back somewhere.
Well, and they still have their flying transports and stuff like that, but they just weren't as useful with the new additions. So now we'd like to see what they change.
They said it's going to be the most dramatic change of all of them. So I'm very interested to see what they add.
And they revealed a new model, which looks really cool and very dynamic.
Cryptek's kind of floating in the air. He's got like a little spider buddy underneath of him.
So then the question comes up then, how are they changing Tau in order to balance that army for the current meta?
Yeah, I mean, it's all definitely speculation at this point. So, I mean,
I have one thing that I want.
Super giant suit that combines with other suits, like a Voltron Tau. All the Riptides come together and, they do the correct configuration, and then they and they just a giant blazing sword.
They can't do that, Jake.
They make a Tau Primarch.
They can't do that, Jake, because then they just win.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
They'd win by default, though.
And you could have Riptides like a black Riptide and a green Riptide. Oh, man. GW, hey, what do you think about a Voltron-style super robot?
But even some of us mentioned it, like within our group, and the Tau have no combat answer.
And they don't really have a Psyker answer at the moment.
Yeah, so then it's like, how do they handle things? And basically, every army now has some form of fallback and still shoot. So that's not really their thing anymore.
Yeah, because you said that was cool when they first came out of the Index. All their suits could jump back and still fire. It's like, wow, that's really powerful.
And now Eldar has a better form of interceptor from them. Eldar got their original interceptor, and now they don't have it anymore.
Strong.
They have like a short range one.
Well, look, it relies on two things, Andrew, which I don't think are readily available. One, a Farseer. Who takes those? Two, a unit that has like a lot of range, that's really good at shooting. Eldar don't have anything like that.
Yeah, bullshit units. But the one thing I would love to see if they did Tau, and I think it's been a long time coming, and GW, please, for the love of God, do it. Everything in a battle suit should be BS 3+.
It's Andrew's dream. He wants that BS 3, but as we all know, Tau have terrible eyesight.
That's just
and they
that's
just
a
need,
myth
they
bullshit.
need big old glasses in there. They got these big old goofy glasses.
It's a super advanced battle suit and shoots like a guardsman. Come
it's
on.
almost like they have fisheye glasses.
They
because
don't.
They're
not aquatic.
Fish people.
They're desert dwellers.
I know, they're not at all. It's so funny. I don't know where that rumor started. I guess because all their vehicles,
blue.
Because all their vehicles are fish
Yeah,
named.
it's because they're blue. Literally, this is the leap. They're blue and they have fish names on their vehicles.
Don't they have like hoof feet?
They have hooves. They're desert dwellers.
Like all fish have.
Like
hooves.
They before they split into their caste, they started as hunter-gatherers on a Tau is a desert planet. Like,
do you think they named all their things fish because they dream of fish? Like, man, can you imagine a world covered in water with, like, I don't know, fins and shit?
I mean, we could just make up our own fluff and say they've never had fish before. They just heard about fish and that they just imagined fish actually fly because they heard swim and they thought swim through the air.
Of course. I mean, it's canon now.
I mean, it
sorry,
makes sense
everybody
to me.
who thought it came from another thing. It's definitely this.
But yeah, I'm very curious to see what they do with Tau. One idea that a friend of mine mentioned that actually was a really cool concept was the idea of the entire army having a supporting fire mechanic.
Kind of bringing back that old, what was it, like fire support?
Oh, well, no, it was called supporting fire.
Okay.
But it was previously like they could combine into one and shoot at a thing, but instead he had this idea that if one thing shoots at a thing, then if another unit shoots at that same thing, they get a bonus. Another unit shoots at that same thing, they get the original bonus and another one, so it's a cumulative bonus essentially. I think that's a cool idea because it forces, once again, like 8th edition, for you to be a good general and have good generalship
Pick
with your
your
army.
order of fire. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
it'd be interesting. I'd love to see something like that because they do need something. I mean,
They need something.
So far, GW has done a pretty good job of like pulling out some interesting surprises, and they've gone as far as just changing abilities on unit entries.
Well, I'm gonna say this right now. Except for a couple minor changes, there hasn't been a bad codex. It just hasn't happened yet.
I mean, we can talk about it right now. Again, we don't know the results of the final 8 of LVO, but there are 2 Blood Angels players in there. There's
Yes.
one who's I think one of the Blood Angels, don't quote me on this, is like a Imperial Guard and Blood Angels.
Yes.
But one is a pure Blood Angels player. I believe it's Michael Brandt. I apologize if I got your name wrong. I should just probably look this up.
Yeah, there are 8. So the 8 players in the finals, maybe going into the meta. There are 2 Blood Angels players. One is more Imperial and Blood Angels. One's basically pure Blood Angels.
Full Blood Angels, which is incredible.
And then there's a so-called, no offense, Space Wolf list.
Well, the majority of his points are from Space Wolves.
It is. It's
but
like
the rest happens to be mortars.
it's essentially 6 Space Wolf HQs, 2 Blood Angel HQs, and then a bunch of Imperial Guard infantry. So soup in its like highest
but
regard.
led by guys on giant wolves.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know,
like
Space Wolves.
Who would you not? Yeah, I mean, who could you not follow orders from those guys?
Yeah.
They're just like the wolf's gonna eat you if you don't.
And then, of course, the 4th dimension is Jeff Poole, Hometown Heroes, running Eldar. And I can't think of what the final 4 armies are. They're all one specific thing. Maybe we'll get to it in a little bit.
Eldari, all Eldari
Now,
with some
Eldari,
Inari.
specifically Inari?
Well, they all have at least one Eldari detachment to get access to stratagems, and then all the rest of it is Inari.
Oh boy, oh boy. Have we talked about everything from the reveals? I think we have.
We have,
Drakari. There's some exciting stuff for AOS, Age of Sigmar. I'm sure you could check out some other podcasts to hear about that. The Daughters of Cain, that was announced, which seemed really cool.
Oh, those models look dope.
I mean, we haven't touched Age of Sigmar in a little while because 8th edition has been all-encompassing, but those models look amazing.
Yes. I mean, in general, the Age of Sigmar models are amazing.
Yeah, they're really beautiful.
We
were often walking around at the tournament, and we would walk by the Age of Sigmar tables where they were playing. Even like the heavy competitive players just have incredibly beautiful armies.
Articulate, beautiful armies.
Just stand there and just look at them.
And we did get to glance at some of the new Nurgle stuff. The new Nurgle models are awesome.
Oh,
the new
look
Great
so
Unclean
cool.
one, it's just the best.
He looks amazing.
He looks like he should.
And kudos to everybody in such a short amount of time for painting them up to that level of quality. Yeah. And by the way, what we mentioned about Age of Sigmar, that's not to say there were plenty of 40K armies that were gorgeous. You guys did an amazing job with your conversions and your paint work. It was awesome.
It's just, I think with Age of Sigmar, because of the flash of the models and then how high quality their paint job and conversions are, and because it's a smaller pool, they're like all really good, then it just like puts like this like aura about them of just like, oh,
it's amazing. And we should talk about just like the tournament kind of in general. It was kind of similar to last year in terms of the setup. I think they had some more like demo stations, some more companies that came into like for their stores and their product. I think they had like more painting sessions.
Well, I mean, shout out to Games Workshop. I mean, they were definitely more highly involved.
Yeah.
And I mean, they ran the Shadowspire tournament.
Or I believe it's Shadespire.
Shadespire, sorry. They ran the Shadespire tournament. Just in general, like it was a better atmosphere, I feel.
Yeah.
And
kudos to the 2 moderators from the reveal night. That was Andy and Pete, I believe.
Yes.
Both on the community team. I believe Pete is head of design. I believe Andy is head of community.
That's correct.
And they were both really great. They were fielding a lot of tough questions that they kind of met in the middle on of things they could kind of answer, maybe not. We also might have heard that of one of the dynasties for Necrons, and that they might actually get a -1 rend buff to all of their weapons as a potential dynasty, which
so gross.
is pretty good. But we don't know. Again, this was some stuff thrown out. It's not confirmed. None of that is confirmed.
We've also heard a potential, because it was asked multiple times due to maybe mic issues.
And nobody could hear each other asking those questions.
That a lot of the older games may be reintroduced, like Battlefleet Gothic.
In particular, Battlefleet Gothic, which you and I are very excited about.
I would absolutely play Battlefleet
man.
Gothic.
Love space battles with those ships. That'll be so much fun. And it sounds like very soon, maybe in a couple of weeks, or at the very next big event, which I don't know what it is. I think it's
in April.
Yeah, is it April? It's not sooner? Well, either way, the next big event, there might be a pretty big big reveal, whether that's a Primarch, which we think it might be, or it's definitely going to be maybe Battlefleet Gothic or a Titanic.
Oh, no, I think they said that Battlefleet Gothic and the others are likely going to be summer at the summer event.
Reveals?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then because there's 3 reveals that are happening towards the summer, there's one reveal with a game that's happening at the next tournament, which is between April and May, whatever, or March and May, I don't know. But I think it's probably more hinted that that's either a Primarch, Titanicus, or both.
Right. Well, we'll have to see. I think they'll probably reveal the Primarch probably around the April timeline. That's kind of like when they did it before, kind of matching that, kind of going that spring and fall reveals for different Primarchs. I think that'll probably match going forward.
And if the order we heard is correct, then it makes sense for it to be revealed then if it is Layman Rusk for then the leading into the Orc Codex is the last one.
Yeah.
So I mean, I
think that's pretty much it. The last thing I will say is some very also smart player asked a dumb question to confirm that, yes, Slaanesh is probably the next Chaos Army to get a pretty nice treatment.
Jay was like, what is the next god to be addressed?
What? I forgot about Khorne Demonkin.
They were like, well, we did Khorne Demonkin.
As soon as he said that, I was like, damn it.
And then we did Nurgle. And then we did
Zench, and then Nurgle.
Well, yeah, okay, sort of.
Well, what do you mean sort of? It was definitely Zench last year.
Yeah, I guess, but they had I meant that they had more Zench this year though. So
at the beginning, and then it ended with Nurgle.
Okay, so regardless, don't try and glaze over the fact that you knew that there was 3 gods revealed.
No.
And then he very SmackDown oriented was like, well, if they did this, then that, then this. You know, it makes it seem like this is the next one.
Yeah, it was rough. But hey, I mean, an answer, right? That felt good.
Jay had to retreat into a corner for a second for that one. Just like, oh, man.
I'm so sorry, everybody. Look, I got one good question. I got one bad question. I feel like I bookended it nicely.
And with regards to the tournament in general, the last thing I want to say is, thanks to Reese and Frankie and Frontline Gaming.
For putting it on again, an incredible tournament. You guys did a great job. Best Coast Pairings, I love the app and how it works.
It's definitely improved from last year.
Yep, so kudos there. Overall, I mean, food was still okay. Drinks aplenty. So yeah, I mean, for anybody considering LVO in the future, highly recommend it. A lot of great people go, a lot of great community interaction.
Yeah.
We went out a couple nights and had some nice dinners with some buddies and
Community in general is pretty great.
It's really, 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 really wonderful event. Definitely couldn't recommend it more. Other than that, I think we can dive into kind of the meta of what we saw at the tournament and where we feel like 8th edition is right now.
Yes, so I think we can split this into 3 parts.
Sure.
So we'll end it with where the factions are standing currently. I think the first 2 things we need to talk about are terrain. That's a big one. And then the second thing we need to talk about is the missions. And then after that, we can talk about what the faction standing is.
Yeah, let's definitely do it. So do you want to kick things off with terrain?
Yeah, so terrain, there was definitely more of it, more line of sight blocking, which is required for 8th edition.
Really nice to have.
I think for my standing, the only major complaint I have, and this is sort of in line with what we were talking about, is the condition of ruins currently. And I personally think, and this is not just as a Tyrannid player with things that are literally called living battering rams, the rule for ruins of only infantry being able to pass through it, I think it just needs to go away. Because with the increase in terrain on the board, for the models that have large bases or for things that are monsters that are combat and stuff like that that don't happen to fly like demon primarchs.
I was just thinking about it. Like, it's not even about levels. They can't even just enter a ruins base
at all. And they're large now. Like, they're 12 inches by 12 inches.
Going up a building is one thing. I get it. But, like, not being able to even enter the bottom floor of a ruin is still really tough for a monster.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I think that needs to go away. I think I still like the bottom floor line of sight blocking, and you have your own opinion about that. But I think the all terrain just needs to be called +1 cover. And
yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the advanced rules in my opinion, just because there's so much stuff to think about. It's easier just to be like cover. Like, +1 to a save, like especially with how lethal shooting is in this edition, like I don't think it's that big of a deal, and it can help some armies.
Yeah.
Like orcs and a lot of like flimsier armies.
Yes.
So I think that's not a terrible thing just to go with the kind of +1 cover, but I do think that's a good point about the monsters. I didn't even think about it. I always think about it, them going through walls or going up a building, but even not being able to enter the area of a ruin sucks.
Especially when there's like even a big hole or something, but because it's bottom level, it's considered blocked and they can't get through. And even if the model could fit through, it's kind of just one of the situations where it's like, this doesn't feel right, and I think it needs to change. Now, with regards to attacking things on multiple levels, I have my own theory that, via cinematic rules, if the monster is bigger than the fucking building, then they should be able to attack the things on multiple levels.
What? That sounds crazy.
I mean, you have 6-inch coherency vertically. Why can't you have 6-inch within 1 inches vertically?
Well, here's the thing. The drywall in the 40K Millennium is like, it is strong as hell, man.
Apparently.
Sorry, 41st Millennium.
41st Millennium.
My
yes.
goodness.
We're not in the 39,000 year, Jay.
What? It's not called Warhammer 39?
But yeah, so that's where I stand with terrain at the moment. Otherwise, I think it's fine. I think if that's a subtle change that I think can really like shake things up. But what do you think about terrain?
And for me, like the only thing, and I'm totally fine with the bottom floor line of sight blocking terrain. It's how things interact with that can be a little bit tricky. And specifically with that is the things in the game that can shoot out of line of sight that don't need to see anything, but can sit in a bottom floor. Like there was a lot of ruins at the LVO this year that were kind of like, they were like little mini buildings. They had one floor, they were very tight, and you could like stick a bunch of mortars. You could stick a bunch of, Dark Reapers with Tempest launchers.
Well, I think that the thing we need to, the elephant in the room is we need to talk about.
I think we get to that one at the very end.
Well, I meant with that unit with Fire and Fade, I think is the problem.
I mean, the Fire and Fade is fine. It's truly the idea that a unit can just be in this kind of like bottom floor, you can't shoot into it, and they block off all the entrances, so things can't get in there unless you assault them, which means there's a lot of armies that don't have a lot of strong close combat, and if you just wall it off and you can't literally get in to shoot them, but they, without leaving at all, can just shoot out and hit everything. They can not only hit things outside, but they can, without ignoring line of sight, they can hit things in other bottom floor, can't see them ruin buildings, and it's crazy. Now, I think it's totally fine. Like, mortars, I don't think are as much the issue. I think mortars are totally fine. They're still an incredible unit. They are very cheap, but I think there's a lot of balance to mortars, because Imperial Guard, they're already shooting at a ballistic skill 4.
Hitting on 4s with
it's variable shots. I mean, other things are variable shots too, but ballistic skill of 4, they can be affected by -1 to hits.
Exactly. It doesn't have any AP. It's not high strength.
Yeah, I think mortars are totally fine. I would still be more okay with if you can do indirect fire. I think you got to be outside of a thing that doesn't have a roof. I mean, that's just my own thoughts, but I think that's totally fine. The biggest thing truly for me, the elven in the room with the terrain and everything from this tournament that was revealed,
the elven in the room.
I like that one. And you'll probably have already heard a lot about this, because we'll get into our predictions of where we think this is going to end up at this point. But man, the Tempest launcher on Dark Reapers, especially the Dark Reaper Exarch, is, it is so mean with this system of the bottom floor is blocked. You can't even get in there to shoot them.
2d6 shots. Strength 4, AP -2.
36-inch range.
36-inch range that always hits on 3s.
3s. That's the big one.
Rerolling
ones because it's an Exarch.
It's too much.
It's so strong. You could see from the games, and we'll get into the games that we played, like it was incredibly powerful. I wouldn't be surprised, and again, we don't know anything, but I wouldn't be surprised with when we talk a little bit more about the top 8 that we're going to see probably some price hikes for Tempest launchers, and probably most importantly, Dark Reapers.
Yes.
Because, man, I mean, Dark Reapers were in full force. We can talk about it right now. Currently, in the top 8, 5 of the players are Eldari of the 8, which is, I mean, as an Eldar player personally, look, I love seeing Eldar in the top 8, but you start to get a little bit of like, oh man, 5?
Yeah.
5 are Eldar?
5, and 4 of them being mainly Inari.
And 4 are Inari. That's the big thing. And it's like, I know some of them don't say Inari, but like that list is powered by Inari. Those Alatok Rangers aren't out there doing all the work. Like, don't worry, guys.
No, it's like double shooting Reapers and stuff like that.
It's double shooting Reapers. It's Shining Spears being able to charge twice.
And then Strength from Death after they kill something and charge again.
That's what I'm saying, charge twice. Something dies from their crazy laser lances.
Yeah.
And then they charge it and kill something else. And then when that last thing dies, they do a move and they just completely leave the area entirely with their move. Because remember, Soul Burst, you can only do one of the Soul Bursts a turn, the type of Soul Burst. But, I mean, with the Shining Spears, you don't really need to do more.
They solved that problem by having just one unit that they're going to apply it to every turn.
Yeah.
I
mean, Dark Reapers shoot twice in the Psychic phase.
The Shining Spears get either the charge twice or the attack twice. Like,
yeah.
And then there's nothing else. Like, it's just, or they get a free move or something else gets a free move. It's literally like you just pass it to one thing and it bypasses that.
Yeah. So, kind of speaking just in the meta in general, with 4 Ynnari players in the top 8, I think people have recognized it at this tournament. I'm sure there's already been a lot of talk about it.
Yes.
I would not be surprised if Ynnari had some further changes. I think even at the GW panel, I didn't hear this, but Andrew, I think you heard it when there was a response from one of the moderators. And again, we don't want to spin rumor out there that this is exactly what they said. This was also in a panel, and they were addressing questions very quickly. But it sounded like Ynnari wasn't a fully fleshed out thing when it was released.
Yes.
I mean, as we've seen with Soul Burst already being fully pared down the first time it came out, I think they were a little fast and loose with that faction.
I'm not going to quote. I'm just going to say that the impression that I received from the Q&A, and we don't know if this is meant to be the impression, but the impression that I got was that faction was a victim of timing with the end of 7th and the beginning of 8th.
Yeah, and that's why I think we didn't really see a big part of it in the Craft World Codex, and there hasn't really been many rumors of them getting their own codex anytime soon. And the thing is, they are, trust me, we'll talk about when we get into our seasons.
Even with the nerf, they're still so strong.
Are incredibly powerful, and it's mostly because those units can still be called Samhain or Ulthwé or whatever. Now, they won't get the faction buffs. Like, Samhain doesn't get the, I think, reroll charges, and Ulthwé doesn't get the 6-up Feel No Pain, but they can use the stratagems.
Yes.
And that's
means the problem.
You can use a Samhain stratagem on the Ynnari, but the Shining Spears, which means they can advance and charge, which is, to me, more powerful than just the rerolling charges. And then for the Ulthwé, you can drop a whole big bomb of 19 Guardians, throw the Black Guardian stratagem on them. They can hit on 2s, and then you word of the Phoenix them, and they can shoot twice.
Yeah.
At 2+ to shoot, 40 shots if you fully blow them out with 40 guys or 20 guys. Like, that's 80 shots. Like, holy crap, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only, as I see it, I think there's only 2 real solutions to the problem. One is to eliminate them having the ability to take their Craft World name.
I think that would go, honestly, I think that would go a very long way to help minimalizing the craziness.
Well, my other change is more of a broad spectrum, not just them change. It's sort of everything change of having a clarification that only things within a detachment from their book can use those stratagems.
I see, and
I prefer that.
And I think it's interesting because we just saw this happen with the Demon Codex,
yeah,
where they very specifically have been like, for the Demon Codex, now I think they should, just as Andrew presented, they should do it for every codex. Now, yes. I know that gets a little wonky with Imperium soups, or maybe there's something that can be done there, and I don't want, and all what we're talking about right now is all off the top of the head. It's not meant to be, knock any specific codex or any faction down. We don't know every faction as in-depth as you might.
But I think it would be better for the health-wise of the game, because then it would be
just
like,
have faction-specific stratagems works on only those factions.
You're investing in a detachment for this army. Mm-hmm. You can only use the stratagems for that detachment, because the way that the Ynnari list is essentially getting around it is by just having to, at minimum, take a patrol of 1 unit of Rangers and a single Warlock, and then suddenly all of the Ynnari have access to their stratagems. And that's a problem. Like, that's a real problem.
And they're not even going to do that. I mean, they would take the 3 Ranger units because they're a great deny.
But that's the potential to just do that. And that's a problem.
And it's just tough with Ynnari because, like, when you combo the better new units that are in the Craft World Codex, because the Craft World units did get a huge buff. I mean, Shining Spears are incredible. Dark Reapers, my goodness. Like, when you look at those new units in the Craft World Codex and you apply Strength from Death on top of it, and you apply the stratagems on top of it, it is just like Strength from Death is just an incredibly powerful powerful, better battle focus.
Well,
And with the way you can do it with Yvraine and how those
that's
units
the problem.
function is like the Word of the Phoenix thing
That's
is
the
really
problem.
what kind of takes it over the edge.
It's because there's a castable strength from death is the problem, because the nerf to it originally was making it 7 inches in infantry only, and then they realized that's not enough, and they almost like did sort of a sideways nerf of saying you can only do one of each in each round,
which is definitely a good reduction. It
That's
also
a good
saves
reduction.
time in the game because a big part of
Exactly.
problem with Ynnari was like they were activating on opponents' turns and it messed up order of operations. It was like, but then do I get to shoot my other gun or do you get to shoot me first?
But yeah, since you have a +1 to casting character that has a fairly cheap
That's
psychic
right.
power,
She has the +1 and the psychic powers are not that hard to get.
I
off.
think I think Word of the Phoenix is only a 6 to cast.
It might be. Don't. It's somewhere around there. But I mean, even with a +1, if it was a 7, it's not that hard to get.
It's
off.
not. So then, like, having that ability for a castable ranged strength from death, like, that's problematic.
It's really good, and she can also throw like another prescience on something. It's kind of like a worse guide. It's like reroll ones. She also has like a targeted smite with gaze. So Yvraine's really good.
Prescience is a +1 to shooting.
It's it's reroll ones.
Then that's not. That's
It's
the
not
different-
prescience.
that's not the
It's
different
not.
prescience.
It's like old prescience, but crappier. It's just a crappier guide. I forget
Okay.
what it's actually called. But basically, yeah. From kind of, I know we kicked this off with the terrain section of the
Yeah.
meta, but we've kind of it has led naturally to the Ynnari conversation because it is a conversation. Is
Yes.
to have look of the 5 Eldari, 1 was just flat Craftworlds, which is our boy Jeff Poole.
Yeah, Jeff.
Rocking, I think, a great list. Alitok with Wave Serpents and some Crimson Hunters, which is awesome to
Yes,
see.
he has 3 crimson.
And
Hunters.
yes, he had some Dark Reapers in there, but it wasn't like he had 3 small units.
It wasn't 4 to
but it
6
wasn't-
units of Dark Reapers,
and it wasn't like a huge blob with Word of the Phoenix. It's a very different thing. It's
Yeah.
and kudos to Jeff, but I think there needs to be a conversation about the Ynnari of it all because, and that's not to say that these players who brought those Ynnari lists, by the way, did anything wrong. It's part of the game.
They're just
It's-
playing the meta.
They're playing the meta. It's a incredibly competitive tournament. I mean, LVO is probably the most competitive tournament I've been to. I'm sure there are crazier ones out there, maybe in ETC that we haven't gone to.
I think Adepticon's pretty competitive.
Pretty
too.
competitive as well. And that's not saying that people aren't coming there just like to mess around. I know everybody's coming to play very seriously, but because of how big LVO is, you get a really big kind of a broad spectrum of players from all over the world.
Yeah.
So you get a great collection of minds, and the top 8 are some incredible players. I do not knock any of them. I've played some of those top lists, and we'll talk about that soon, but those lists are very well crafted, very well executed. You got to be a good general to pull them off, but it still speaks to when you have 4 of the top 8 are playing basically almost the same list with maybe instead of Shining Spears, it's like some Swooping Hawks, but it's exactly it's almost the same
Yes.
idea.
So the last part that we wanted to talk about was the missions real quick. So one spin with the new ITC missions that I've noticed, and this is sort of something that you and I had stepped into a little early with the crafting of our lists, but more and more people are essentially crafting their lists to counter the secondary missions.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So, it's curious because the way I see it moving forward, unless some armies are required to say like take units of 10, so then like Reapers a given, or take a lot of characters, so then Headhunters a given, it's very possible that in many of the games you play, it will be impossible to get full secondaries.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were seeing that a lot in our last games where like we both tooled our lists to be hard to get secondaries. Yeah. And by the way, if you don't know what we mean by secondaries, in ITC, when you play the missions, when you score each round, it's not off of cards or anything like in the regular core rulebook. It's actually based off of how many objectives you hold, how many units you killed in your turn, and then the secondaries are special missions that you pick at the top of the game based on your opponent. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It lets you actually tailor your scoring to your actual opponent each game.
Yeah, there's essentially a pool of secondaries that you can choose from after you see your opponent's list, so then you can choose the right ones for his army. And the reason why this is a great and dramatic change from what it used to be is because your secondaries used to be based on a die roll. And when it was based on a die roll, the inevitability is if you roll bad, you just never score
You
secondaries.
just don't win, yeah.
And so then with the new meta and the way that people are essentially manipulating their lists to be harder for secondaries, it's made it not only a harder meta, but it's also altered it to where some secondaries that you'd never think to take because they're so hard, one that's called Death by 1,000 Cuts, which you have to take, you have to kill 3 units a turn, that may become a more used secondary because no one's people are trying to take non-units of 10 for Reaper, but lots of little units of 5 and stuff.
Which on the back end, like my list was definitely tooled to not give up those like 10 plus, for Reaper. But later in the tournament, I saw people playing against my list were constantly picking Death by 1,000 Cuts, and they were doing well with it when they were. Because my list, I've got a bunch of little Dire Avengers all over the place. If you crack my Wave Serpents and they come out, you can start blasting away at them and get 3 easily.
Well, because you have 8 units of 5.
I have 6 units of 5.
Well, no, because you have 6 units of 5 Dire Avengers, and then you have 3 units of 5 Rangers.
Oh, right. So I have 9.
9, sorry.
9 small troop
units. You have
units.
9 small troop units. You have a smattering of HQs. So essentially, like, people see that, and they're like, well, I have to it's Eldar, which are T3, and Dire Avengers are only a 4+ save.
Yeah.
So they just see that, and they're like, that's one of the few that I can go
Blast
for.
away, yeah.
For me, it only happened twice, and it's because I was running a brigade, and I had, at the very least, 6 units of Rippers, and Rippers are not hard to dispatch. So it was just like, as soon as people saw that, they're like, well, just kill those Rippers, and those Rippers. Then next turn, those Rippers, and those Rippers, and maybe like throw a Carnifex or something in there.
Yeah,
and it's just
but
like,
Death by 1,000 Cuts, not that hard now with how people tool it. So kudos to Reese and Frankie for throwing in the Death by 1,000 Cuts, which I thought early on we weren't going to see very much of because I thought it was very hard to get. But now with how people are challenging their list building, it's coming up a lot more.
The missions are good. I enjoy them. I like being able to pick them.
Gangbusters is probably the least you see.
I
these
think
days, 'cause
Gangbusters.
it's tough.
I think Gangbusters may need to get rethought because it may be impossible.
But outside of that, like occasionally I think I did it once against a 3-man unit. Again, I only got 3 points, but a 3-man unit of what are the things from AdMech? The Chicken Walkers.
Oh, because they're more than 4 wounds.
They're 6 wounds apiece. So when you're 5 wounds or more, you get a point per model.
Whereas 3 to 4 wounds, you only get a point for every 2 models.
Which is there's not many units that are going to give that up that are readily used in the competitive scene.
Or people just won't choose to have a unit that big.
Choose to field them that big, yeah. And the other thing, too, is probably the second one that you see the very least is probably Titanic, just because a lot of those units you don't see that much anymore in the edition. Even Primarchs aren't Titanic unless I'm
They
crazy.
are not.
So, you might see, I ran into one Shadow Sword at the tournament.
There were some Knight players.
I didn't run into any other Titanic units, though, outside of that one.
The only Titanic units that I saw were a few Knight players. One person had a Brass Scorpion that I saw. I think there was more. The one person had a Throne of Skulls, and then a few smattering of people had Baneblade variants, like a Shadow Sword and stuff like that. So, I would say it's just one that's there in the event that you run into a Titan, and you're like, well, I got to kill that thing, so I might as well go for the points. But, I think Gangbusters is... It's a problem right now. That one's
it's a tough one.
It's almost impossible to get even to get more
than 2 points. But who knows? Maybe with Custodes coming out now, you might get a few more points.
But they can just drop their Terminators and split them all apart, and then now you can't get it.
Yeah, but we'll see. That's a lot of stratagems to spend to split up all your units. But yeah, maybe we'll see again. This might be with more codexes to come. Because who knows? Reese and Frankie have shown that they might know what's coming. Obviously, they've play tested all the codexes.
Well, and as you know, since I used to work in games and stuff like that, you can play test as much as you can, but as soon as it's in the public,
in the wild,
they play test it infinitely more than you ever could. So something like LVO is a great platform to tell them how they need to make subtle tweaks.
And I guess one other thing to caveat there is this is the competitive scene. The ITC missions are also meant to be used totally globally, right? Yeah. So this Gangbusters might not be big in the competitive scene, but in casual or moderately competitive scenes, there might be plenty of units that are taken at that size, and then they're right there.
Yeah.
I guess kind of the last thing is actually we were going to talk about where we think what factions are sitting at the top currently. I think we can probably start with, again, we don't know the results.
It's Eldari.
I'd love to, after this, by end of day today, you guys already know, I would love to see Blood Angels sitting at the top.
Oh, yeah.
That would be amazing. That
Especially
would be incredible.
if it was the pure Blood Angel
and I'm an
list,
Eldari
I'd be like,
player.
holy shit.
But yeah, I love that Blood Angels would be up there.
Or Jeff Poole.
Or Jeff Poole. Yeah, hold on. Let me caveat that. First, Jeff Poole, number 1, with a bullet. And then Blood Angels followed by.
Jeff Poole, if you were to lose to one person at the final table, which you're going to be at, it will be the Blood Angels. And this is all true, and reality will now change after you hear this podcast recording, or it's legit. I think we can dip to just get the bottom of the barrel out of the way, which is the ones that don't have codexes are essentially the ones that are struggling.
I think they're the ones that are struggling. I'm really excited to see what Drukhari and Tau and Necrons offer those factions.
Orcs,
their codexes.
Drukhari, Tau,
Orcs,
Necrons.
Space Wolves even too.
The aloof ones like Arlequins,
good old Harlequins.
like Death Watch, stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's just codex
Sisters of Battle.
Yeah, it's just non-codex can't compete with codex. Sisters has some tricks.
Sisters they're probably the best index army.
Yes, I would say.
But then when you look at the actual ones that do have codexes, I think right now,
Stratagems.
inarguably, I think Eldari are probably at the top if I'm looking at, and it's, I would say mostly because of Ynnari. I think if you didn't have Ynnari in this tournament,
There'd be less of a smattering.
I think there'd be a lot less Eldar at the top. I think you'd see a lot, honestly, I think you'd see a lot more chaos, which surprisingly,
no chaos
in the top 8, which I have to say, we didn't talk about this, but like going into LVO, I had a feeling that we would actually see a lot more Eldar and even Tyranids going into the top 8 than Chaos. And there was always the talk of like, well, Chaos have the best codex and like they're so strong, but in recent months,
we should clarify specifically CSM,
Chaos Space Marines, not demons. But for a while, it's been talked that they're the best codex, the most power, most flexibility. But in the last few months, with Eldari, like people really digging into that codex, Tyranids, people really digging into that codex, I've started to see the power of Chaos Space Marines wane a bit, not completely, but wane a little bit. And I think LVO has shown that the tricks that the Eldari and specifically the Ynnari have at their fingertips really do give some issues to Chaos.
I still think the top 3 are Eldari, then underneath them, I mean, I have to say Blood Angels because they have 2 people there.
Or Imperium in some capacity.
Imperium, but focused on Blood Angels, and then directly beneath them, number 3 is still Chaos. Like, they're
for sure.
Still a very competitive.
And that's not to say that Chaos is out at all. I think it's there's going to definitely be some meta adjustment post LVO, which I'm excited to see how that shakes out.
Oh, and remember, like this isn't in a vacuum. A lot of the success of how much you score in these tournaments is via draw. Because you can go against some maybe less experienced players, and then the game's a little slower, and you score less, and that's just an inevitable fact of life for a tournament. Whereas then you could go against a very competitive player that you're just not prepared to think as fast as they are, and then they just like overrun you, and it's But yeah, after that, Nids surprisingly didn't have
the highest showing.
And Jeff Robinson had commented on that because he was in the tournament. You may know him as In Control. But I think the problem, because I'm a Nid player, and I still went 4-2, which is not bad. I think it's because we were in such a bad place for so long that adapting to where our codex is currently is going to have to take time.
Take a little time. And we talked about this a little bit, that because it hasn't been good for so long, it hasn't drawn the most competitive players like a Sean Naden or a Nick Nadavati, or Paul Shell, like any of those top players,
Brandon Grant,
guys. Like it just because it hasn't been in the position to warrant drawing those players. So I think once we see their more development in this edition, I think you're going to see a few more of those players jump into or try out Tyranids with a lot of success.
And I mean, playing in the tournament, the losses were entirely my fault, and the codex is very strong.
It is a really good codex, and you're right. You're a terrible player.
Yeah,
just like I am.
Yeah,
and
the universe has realigned.
The universe has realigned. We did well in that last tournament, and then we went to LVO, and the universe was like, hey. Get back down.
Val, if you're listening to this, the universe is realigned. We are not in the top 8.
Shout out to the very real name of Val Hevelfinger.
Yeah.
That's definitely legitimately his real name.
Yes.
He confirmed it for us. He was very nice. He came up and said, hey to us. Hey, Val, you were really fun to hang out with.
Thanks for the shout out on Chapter Tactics.
Yeah. Also a great podcast.
We still suck.
We still suck. Don't worry, everybody. If you thought we were going to go to LVO because we happened to do well at the LVO prep tournament earlier this month, don't worry. We're still making some big mistakes.
Yep.
And I think that actually leads us pretty seamlessly into our Seasons of the Month.
Jay, you're going first.
Son of a bit. Oh, God. All right. So my Seasons of the Month can be summarized in Ynnari? Oh God, Ynnari! That's gonna be the summary of mine. So for the tournament, just to kind of quickly go over my games. By the way, all my games played some great opponents, all very fun to play with.
Got great variety until your last
got
two.
a lot of great variety until those last two games. My very first game, I played a fellow Eldari player. He was running Footdar. The Avatar was there. It was actually a really cool list. A sad story in that game, I was running Ozerman, who's a beast in close combat, ran up to fight a Banshee unit, completely whiffed,
and
didn't
got
kill a
punked.
single one, and in Exarch with an Executioner, killed him in one fight phase. It was pretty brutal. But I managed to pull out a win in that game, but kudos to my opponent. He was great to play against. My second game, I actually went up against a Raven Guard player, or actually I guess they're a Raptor. Raptor player, who was using Laius Isodon. I'd actually never played this type of list. I'd heard that Laius Isodon was like really good.
He's a very good character.
And I was like, well, we'll see what happens. So I gave him first turn, which was probably a mistake.
Yes.
Because I have my kind of how my list works that I took to LVO. I have 3 Wave Serpents and
Packed to the brim.
Packed in the brim. Inside each Wave Serpent is 2 separate units of 5 Dire Avengers with an Exarch, the double Shuriken catapults, and then each Wave Serpent has kind of its own like little group of HQs.
Smattering
I'll have
of characters.
Warlock Conclave of 2 guys in one. I had a Spirit Seer and Ozerman in another to be up on the front line smacking people to hunt down characters. And then I've got just another Warlock in another one to provide buffs for Ozerman and some of the other units. And then around those Wave Serpents, I've got 3 units of Rangers that I use to deny and help me gain position for my Deep Strikers. And then I have a unit of Fire Dragons and a unit of Dark Reapers that deep strike in wherever I need them for positioning to take out whatever I need to, supported by an Autarch and a Farseer. So that's basically my list. And the whole kind of idea of the list is to leave most things off the board or inside Wave Serpents turn 1, to absorb shots and then see where my opponent is and then counter with Deep Strikes. That's kind of the game, and then overwhelm them with Dire Avengers. But basically, I was like, Wave Serpents are pretty durable. I could probably take a turn hit, and I stayed inside, and I didn't realize with this Raptor, basically Raven Guard stratagems, you can infiltrate your, what are they called? Aggressors.
Yes.
And he had 2 units of aggressors, 6-man units each. So he infiltrated these guys within, I believe it's 18 inches of their guns, right next to my Wave Serpents. And then each unit, with their standing still and firing everything twice, they each shot about 120 shots into my Wave Serpents apiece. So about 240, 250 freaking bullets went into my Wave Serpents and cracked one of them pretty easily. The other 2 were still barely intact. Luckily, his Devastator squads, everything fired into him. Guys, Wave Serpents are hard to kill. And I managed to counterattack and win that game. But that was very surprising what Laius Isodon and a bunch of aggressors can do with so many shots.
Well, and he had mentioned that I remember this game. He had mentioned specifically that this wasn't like his usual list, and if he had the normal like 3rd unit of aggressors and then all the Vanguard guys that are combat also infiltrating, I think you probably wouldn't have given him first turn.
No, I probably would have.
Because
that's a lot of bullets.
Because if you had, he probably would have tabled you.
Yeah, man, guys, aggressors are really good. They're cheaper now. Definitely take a look at them.
Yes.
I probably will, because Primaris, they are luring me towards their awesome models. But anyways, my 3rd game for day 1, so I won my first 2. My 3rd game, I went up against an Imperial Guard player. He had a Shadow Sword, Basilisks, a bunch of guard on the ground. Really great player. I'd played him before at a previous GT. We had a good game. I ended up pulling out a win because a huge risky move. I got turn 1, and I was like, okay, he's got a Shadow Sword in the back. He's got a nice screen in front of him, so I couldn't deep strike my Fire Dragons within the 12 inches that I need to shoot them with Melta. So I was like, all right, I've got one risk. I dropped my Warlock Conclave out. They have Quicken and Protect. So Protect and Jinx, Quicken and Restrain, they're the dual powers. And I was like, all right, if this fails, I literally lose this game. Because the only thing that can take out the Shadow Sword, yes, my Dark Reapers can shoot at it, but I only have 1 unit of Dark Reapers.
Eventually,
but he showed that he could easily kill my Dark Reapers, by the way, in 1 turn. So I dropped down my Fire Dragons, rolled my dice. I need a 7 for Quicken. I get a 2 and a 2. And I was like, command point, reroll that 2, and I got a 5. And I got the 7 I needed. His Psychers weren't in range to deny. The Fire Dragons went up, did enough damage to the Shadow Sword. The Dark Reapers and a couple other things put shot into it, and I managed to blow it up. And that's really what changed the game, was that turn 1 killing the Shadow Sword. Because otherwise, I think he would have just walked over my army. So I got 3 out of day 1. Went to day 2. First game was an Imperial Guard player with a bunch of Leman Russes, tank commanders, things like that, a bunch of guys with autocannons and mortars. I managed to get my Fire Dragons and Dire Vendors in position and eventually kind of take out most of the tanks and things. I ended up winning that game again. Great opponent. Now, I was 4-0 at this point. 4 wins, no losses yet.
Yeah.
Going to my last 2 games. And this is where I got hit with my Ynnari. Oh, God, Ynnari game. My 5th game was experiencing what is now one of the players in the top 8, Brad Chester. I played him in the 5th round, and he was playing a list very similar to also Nick Nadavati's list. Basically, Ivrain with a whole bunch of Shining Spears, 3 units of Dark Reapers, and then a big unit of Dark Reapers with under Ynnari, all with Tempest Launchers, not all of them, just the Exarchs, and then a whole big blob of Guardian drop that he can also wear to the Phoenix and double shoot.
Rangers
and Wave Serpents, and man, I was not ready for what this thing brought and what it could do. I also, and this kind of goes into my first big C's. This is my first big C's of the month, and I have 2 big ones from this tournament for both games. Because I do think there's opportunity, and I don't want to say, like, I could have totally beat that guy, because I think that's kind of silly to say. But I totally think I could have put myself in a better position for this game if I'd done one thing. So this goes all out to how you plan your turns out, how you plan your game. And that's what a really good general does. They're thinking a few steps ahead. So I had won the roll-off to go first, and it came down to infiltrators. I got the roll to put my infiltrators in first. So I smattered them around, covered one of the objectives, put another one in the back just to shoot at his guys. But one area I didn't put my infiltrators was right in the center, which is right where I was going to go to drop down Fire Dragons, to do some stuff to shoot his Wave Serpents. And what this did was a huge mistake. He immediately saw my error, and when he infiltrated, he dropped his Rangers right in the center. What this did is this created a huge, 18-inch diameter, 9-inch bubble block of any Deep Strikers, and they were Deep Strikers I needed to drop down and shoot his Wave Serpents to crack them open to attack the Dark Reapers and guys that were inside and basically hold them off for a turn. And I didn't do this because he perfectly denied that drop point for me, because I was going to drop in my Fire Dragons and then fire and fade them into that cover where his Rangers were to basically keep them from getting shot off the board when his stuff came out of the Wave Serpents or dropped in the very next turn. And because he did that, he completely shut down my area of kind of denying him as well for Deep Strikers, as well as having good positioning to hold part of the board. He basically cut off half of the board for me, the center part, and that actually helped him in later turns because he actually used that same Ranger unit to wrap around my Wave Serpents. So when he blew them up, some of my guys actually died coming out because there wasn't enough room to place all of them. So he's a really great player, really, really strong list. I learned a lot from playing it, but man, made a huge mistake in placing my infiltrators. So that's my first C's of the month. Now, the last game. I also played another Ynnari player. His list was a little different. He didn't have Shining Spears, but he had Swooping Hawks. Everything else was basically the same. Farseers, Yvrain, a big blob of Dark Reapers with 3 individual units of Dark Reapers, all in Wave Serpents, that same deal. But basically, my big error in this game, and this was, oh my god, this is probably my most frustrating error of the entire game, because this was a trick I like to use. There's a trick where, and we kind of referenced it very earlier in this episode, where Eldar can basically do a type of interceptor, where essentially if you have a Farseer within 6 inches of another unit, another Eldar unit, an infantry unit that is of the same craft world, they can spend 2 CP, 2 command points, to do what's called, I think it's called Forewarned or Forewarning. And essentially that unit can immediately shoot at something that just arrived from Deep Strike, that just came in. Now, if you do this with Dark Reapers, you can pretty much shoot anything that arrives on the board, which is really, really powerful. Well, I completely forgot that he had a Farseer right next to his big blob of Dark Reapers. And I was like, all right, I'm going to drop in my Dark Reapers now that his guys are out in there. I'm going to try to shoot them. I just got so excited about putting my Dark Reapers out, I completely forgot about my own trick. I was even putting my Farseer with those Dark Reapers to do this very same trick when his stuff comes in. And I put them down, and immediately afterwards he goes, oh, your Dark Reapers are down? I'm like, yeah, they're down. He's like, okay, I'm going to interrupt and do the 4. And I was like, no. And he did. He rolled perfectly, and all my saves were terrible. He killed 8 of my 9 Dark Reapers. Just blew the whole unit off the table, essentially. And the other one, obviously, auto morale failed at the end of the turn. And holy crap, that completely changed the game. That end of the game, we actually only came down to a 1-point difference. but losing my whole Dark Reaper unit, which kudos to him. I mean, great setup with his Farseer and the Dark Reapers. He positioned that well. I definitely could have put those Dark Reapers somewhere else where they weren't in line of sight for that to happen. That was a huge mistake on my part, especially since it's my own army and my own darn trick. And man, that crushed me. So my two biggest C's of the month, one, use your infiltrators well to think ahead of where you want to be, especially if you're using deep strikers. And my second C's of the month is definitely know your own tricks, and especially if your opponent has them, think about them throughout the game before you do something silly like that. So those are my C's of the month. That was my time at the tournament. I had a great time, all great opponents, really smart and interesting lists, and I'm definitely walking away. I think the most important thing for Andrew, myself, and anybody hopefully at LVO is, since we're kind of halfway through 8th edition, this is a great time to really test out what you want to see and see if it works, and walk away with really good ideas going forward. So those are my C's. Andrew, what are your C's?
So I should describe what I'm running for what I ran for this tournament. So I didn't have my fully optimized NID list. I mean, I innately just mix things up all the time because I can't settle on one thing. But I wasn't able to finish enough in time. Ironically, one of the units I didn't finish, which was my third unit of Meiotic Spores, I'm now not going to have because I don't think I need 3 units. I think 1 unit is actually fine, and I'll explain that in a second. But I'm running a full brigade of NIDs. So Swarmlord, Old One Eye, a Neurothrope, and a Broodlord, just because I wanted to try the Broodlord out and see how he holds up. Then for troops, just 6 units of Rippers, because I don't really like using any of the other troops. I do really like Warriors, and I will find a way to use them, but currently I'm just like, I don't know where they fit.
And Rippers help a lot in terms of like denial, and they do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, if the enemy doesn't have infiltrators, but they have deep strikers, and I get first turn, I can basically force him to deep strike only in his deployment zone, and that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
For my elites, because once again, this is a brigade, I have to have 3 of everything. I had a unit of Zoanthropes, a unit of 6, on the fence of whether or not I'll keep them. They do work sometimes, but then a lot of times they're really just more tough than anything else. I had the Death Leaper.
Good old Death Leaper.
I had the Red Terror.
The Red Terror!
Which I'll have a funny story that I'll get to in a second. For my fast attack, I had 2 units of 5 Meiotic Spores. These are the Forge World version of Mucilid Spores.
And these things are pretty good for a specific reason.
I'm not going to get into the full strategy. I'm sorry. It's my strategy. But they do things so they're infiltrating spores, and they can do funny things with movement, and they do a lot of mortal wounds. So I'm going to leave it right there.
Take it from there.
But then my last fast attack was just a single Mucilid Spore just to fill in that ablative, which ironically I thought the Red Terror was a fast attack choice because there's 2 fast attack choices in the book.
That's a
before
really
him.
big screw up on how they put him in the book.
I feel like if they wanted to do that, why not just make him the last elite and then it's fast attack right after that? So that's weird. But then my heavies, I had 4 Carnifexes, which they're just my favorite.
They're just great.
I had 2 Blasterfexes, the standard 4 Devours with Brain Leech Worms, Enhanced Sentence, the Spore Cysts. I mean, if you're taking Carnifexes, take Spore Cysts. Why wouldn't you? The -1 to hit always is so strong. Against shooting, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not like limited range, even at 1 inch.
Yeah, it's just even at 1 inch, he's still.
So then I had 2 melee Carnifexes, which are amazing. It's super sad that the non-Screamer Killer is better than the Screamer Killer.
Amazing.
So the way let me clarify with that. The Screamer Killer is the double-scything talon with the enhanced bioplasmic scream.
And do a nice scream, yell at you, and blow you up.
They can still get the spore cysts and stuff like that, but you can't alter their head because they have the bioplasmic scream. And they do have one extra rule that is like if you're near them, you have a -1 to your leadership, or you take a -1 to your morale tests or a +1 to your morale tests because they're scary. But the regular Carnifex can still take double-scything talons, can still take spore cysts, but instead of the bioplasmic scream, which on a 4+ to hit model, that's almost always going to want to advance, so then a 5+, it's like not as useful. It's also D6 shots, and variable shots never work out well for me. The regular Carnifex, you can go double-scything talons, you can go the spore cyst for the -1, but then you can also give it tusks, which means you get an extra attack when you charge.
That's good.
You can also give it a tail, which is another attack when you charge. So, and then, like, obviously you're always going to give them adrenal glands because a +1 to advance and charge is, why wouldn't you do that? So it's ironic that version of the Screamer Killer is just like a better Screamer Killer, but they're only 107 points. They're super cheap for an 8-wound model that's really hard to kill, and they butcher whatever they touch. It's hilarious. And then, so that was basically my list. That was everything in it. Game 1, I went against, of all things, Inari. Ironically, I didn't have a rough time, even though it was a very similar list to the current 4 lists that are in the top 8.
And now I do want to clarify, I do know Sean Naden's list, who is Inari, is a little different than the Inari list that you are seeing. So I do want to caveat that.
So
he actually is running some like crazy Oathway stuff. Eldrad Oathran's in
Yes.
there. So you know what? My top 3 picks are Jeff Poole is number 1, Blood Angels is number 2, and Eldrad Oathran up there number 3. I'm also happy with that.
Okay, so not him. Like more like Nick Nadavati and
Brad Chester.
Brad Chester. So more like their list.
Did it have Shining Spears and stuff like that in there?
It didn't. No, it had Shining Spears.
Okay.
It had a big blob of Reapers. Mm-hmm. It had smaller units of Reapers. It had Yvrain. It had some Wave Serpents. Like it was basically very similar with only a few slight tweaks, like less Rangers and a couple other things. But I had the advantage of going first. And if you know anything about the current NIDs, they're very fast.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very fast.
Very surprisingly fast.
And I was able to get great position in the center of the board. And then when he brought in his Reapers and he brought in his Shining Spears, because he deep struck both of them, because he obviously deep strikes his Shining Spears to then quicken them.
And then he deep struck the Reapers.
He deep struck the Reapers.
Oh, he didn't have a deep striking Guardian unit?
He did not have a deep striking Guardian.
So
that's like the slight
that's
variances.
Some of the variants. Okay.
So he deep struck the big blob of Reapers. He deep struck the Shining Spears to quicken them, obviously. But the MVP of that game was definitely Shadows in the Warp.
Because I'm assuming the Quicken didn't go off.
The Quicken didn't go off?
That is, if the Shining Spears don't get the Quicken off, that's the shutdown of that unit.
And it was because of the -1, because he rolled an 8 with a reroll.
Oh.
And which goes down to a 7, and I rolled an 8.
Wow.
And it was just like, holy shit, like...
Shadows in the Warp, baby!
And then he also failed his 9-inch charge, because he still tried to charge with them, because why wouldn't he?
Yeah,
like, he has to charge with them, because they do bonus damage when they charge. But he failed the 9-inch charge, which a 9-inch charge is really hard, let's be clear.
Yeah.
The Reapers
also,
came
people
down.
can't control die rolls. Like,
Yes.
doesn't matter how good of a player are you. If you've mastered that, look, you shouldn't be playing Warhammer. You should be in Vegas full time.
The Dark Reapers came down. Yvrain tried to Word of the Phoenix them. Shut down.
Okay.
So
yeah, let me clarify. Inari is really good if they get their psychic powers off.
Yes, they're very power reliant.
Yeah,
And,
psychic powers.
Because those two didn't happen, he only got to shoot with his Reapers once, and then they're out in the open, and Stormlord just went over there and did what he does.
I mean, if those don't go off, then yeah, you can hit them real hard. Because again, at the end of the day, they're T3.
Yeah.
They're Space Keeblers.
And then both the melee Carnifexes and Old One Eye went into the Shining Spears, and you can guess how that went.
Yep, that probably went very poorly for them.
So that was basically...
So what you're saying is that you fully believe that you could have crushed Nick Nadavati. Well,
That's
hear
right.
it here first, Nick. He's calling you out.
But really, the MVP of the game beyond Shadows was the Red Terror, because it was the only time he did anything in the entire tournament.
This is pretty incredible, though.
So the
Red Terror did what a lot of players wanted to do at the end of that tournament.
Yeah, so the one time he left a gap in his back line, he left just a big enough gap for Red Terror to fit in and have a 10-inch charge against Yvrain. So I put him there. I rolled the dice. I got a 10-inch with a reroll. Holy shit, I'm in combat with her, and if you don't know what the Red Terror does, he has 5 attacks that hit on 2s, rerolling 1s. If he hits with at least 4 of them, he can attempt to swallow whole one model in the unit. You have to roll a die and equal to or greater than their wounds characteristic, not current wounds, and they're removed from the game.
And what happened to old Yvrain?
Charged, hit with all 5 attacks, rolled the die, got a 2, used the CP, rerolled it, got a 5, your brain's gone.
That's incredible.
So in that turn, he didn't get his psychic powers off. He lost his Shining Spears, he lost his big Reaper Blob, and he lost your brain.
That's pretty much
and that's
the
it.
list.
Like,
that's pretty much it.
All the teeth was gone, so that was game 1. That was great. So in game 2, I played against James Carmona, who plays at our the store that we play at occasionally.
Yeah, he shows up and plays in the local GTs that we have at Game Empire.
So he was playing mainly Chaos Space Marines with some demons thrown in, like some screening horrors, and he was using the horror bomb, the deep striking horrors that are all shooty and they're very powerful, with a couple heralds and stuff like that. But most importantly, he had 3 units of obliterators, which were Slaanesh, of course, so that they have the option of shooting twice.
The double shoot, pretty good.
So multiple mistakes were made in this game. The most important one was I am, in general, and this will be a recurring theme with my second Cs, I'm too aggressive with this list. Mainly because it's melee and I want to get in there.
You want to get those big bugs in there.
I want to get stuck in it.
To do the stabby stab.
So yeah, I want to get stuck in combat, and so I play too aggressively with it when I should hold back. And specifically with him, he had the 3 units of obliterators were deep striking, and they were really the most dangerous thing for Swarmlord, who's kind of like a really good enhancer for the rest of the list.
Okay.
So I left a gap in my back line instead of just like patching it with rippers, which I could have done because I went first and had deep striking rippers, and I could just done that, and I didn't. And so he deep struck all 3 units of obliterators behind me and just blew Swarmlord away. And I was just like,
wow.
Well, I think this is the beginning of the end.
Oh, Swarmlord.
Because I hadn't even hit combat with anybody else. So it was just like, my spores did some damage and stuff like that, but then it was just like, it was basically me like dancing back and forth, and I slowly got picked apart. So I lost that game. Third game, I was against another Tyranids player.
Tyranids on Tyranid matchup, the game we all want. You know, when all the bugs kill each other, then we all win, right?
So, unfortunately, he had basically 3 teeth units for combat. He had a 20-man Genestealer blob. He had Swarmlord as well, and he had a Flyrant with Scything Talons and Devourers. Is
nice.
Like the Kraken shooty stabby combo. He also had like an Exocrine, some Hive Guard, a few Biovores, just like a loose gun line, which the Exocrine, yeah, I mean, I don't like him because he's just always bad for me for some reason, but he does work.
He does.
Especially when you put Pathogenic Slime on him, which gives him bonus 1 attack.
Yeah.
And it's auto 3 damage with his shooting it does a lot. It's really mean.
A lot of damage.
I was able to Alpha Strike his Genestealer bomb with my mines doing their trick that I won't mention. And blew up more than half, either half the squad or more than half the squad, which meant by the time they hit me, they basically did like a little bit of damage, but then they're gone. And then his Flyrant came in and old one I went to work and
killed him.
And then ironically, I was like, you know what, fuck it, and I went Swarmlord on Swarmlord with him.
Yes, the ultimate Swarmlord showdown.
We both had Catalyst up. I was able to Alpha Strike him because I had also paroxysmed his Swarmlord.
When they ran up to each other, did they both put their hands up and start mirroring each other?
No, it was more like they were like clanging swords together type of thing.
All right, well, I'll swing low. Well, he swung low. All right, well, I'll swing high. Oh, he swung high. Damn it.
So I actually managed to do, no, it wasn't great damage. I did 5 damage to him.
Ooh.
Of which 4 he catalyst away. So I did 1 damage to him, and then
nice.
he struck back, though no mortal wounds from the swings, and I saved all of them.
So a very high bloody battle was going down between 2 Swarmlords. Basically perfectly matched, as it sounds like it.
So then that continued basically for another 2 combats.
Jeez.
Of slapping each other. He left combat to think about going after my guys, and then just decided, fuck it, it wasn't worth it, and went back into Swarmlord. And I think eventually I just ganged up on Swarmlord with a bunch of stuff all together. My Swarmlord plus like a Broodlord and some other stuff, and eventually killed him. And once that last piece of melee was gone, it was essentially I was in his lines and with a lot of melee.
And his gun line wasn't going to be able to stand up against your close combat guys.
I mean, it was like a unit of Termagants, a unit of Hormagaunts. I was able to deep strike the Death Leaper in and catch the Exocrine, so he couldn't shoot anymore.
Right.
And it was just like, that was essentially just the beginning of the end once Swarmlord went down. So in my 4th game, this was brutal. So this was game 1 of day 2. This was the big C's. Against James, like, if I think I've deployed it differently, I could have won that game. It still would have been very close, but I think I could have won it. I would have had at least a chance and not just gotten overrun. In this game, I was a complete idiot. Complete idiot. So this guy was running Bobby G.
Old Bobby.
He was running a fighter I've never seen before. It was called like a Marauder fighter or something like that. But 4 last cannons, a 3-shot missile array, very strong anti-tank, like hits on 2s and ridiculousness. A Leviathan Dreadnought, which is a Forge World Dreadnought.
It's like the Super Dreadnought.
It's like tougher than a Land Raider.
It's like a Dreadnought ate another Dreadnought.
No, it's like it ate like 5 Dreadnoughts.
Oh my god.
But it's actually ironically not huge, but it's tougher than a Land Raider.
Jesus.
It really is. Like, it's like 2+ to hit, 2+ save, 4+ invul, 6 up feel no pain. Like, it's hard as hell.
I mean, they don't make them like they used to, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. But that had really nasty guns. But the point of this story is that the majority of his weapons that weren't like anti-tank or were like perched, there was enough line of sight blocking that I could have just like deployed to the left. Since I had so many reserves, he had to deploy his entire army. It was very elite, meaning he had just a few units and basically in the center all around Bobby G for his rerolls.
I wonder why.
And then I could have just been like, well, you deployed your entire army. I haven't actually deployed anything yet. Here's all of my bombs to the left side behind line of sight blocking cover. And if I had done that, I basically could have hit the halfway point of the field without him able to shoot me with anti-tank, and then charged his entire line all at once.
Jeez.
Instead, the aggressive Andrew decided to deploy everything in the front.
Nice!
Not only in the front.
In line of sight?
In line of sight.
Ooh.
Also, except for...
Bold move.
Except for Swarmlord. There's the only smart choice. And...
I like the idea of Swarmlord being like, yeah, guys, just go...
where I am?
Just go stand out over there. Just go stand... but sir, this is in the middle. No. I got a plan. What about you? Are you going to join us? I'm just going to stay back here.
Also, the majority of his fire was 24 inches, and I deployed at the point where he could basically get all of his 24-inch shooting into it. So yeah, it was bad. I will say that the dice gods also left me completely barren. First 30 3+ saves, I passed 5. So all my Zoanthropes died. I think turn 1 was Zoanthropes all dead, Neurothrope dead. Both melee Carnifexes.
Neurothrope was your warlord, right?
Neurothrope was warlord, so he maxed out 2 secondaries right there. Oof. Because he had Kingslayer and I think I don't remember what the other one was, but it was like he basically maxed out 2 secondaries right off the bat. Killed both melee Carnifexes, killed 1 shooty Carnifex, which is like more than half of my army.
Yeah.
So like it was really bad.
Wow.
So I managed to pull out though a 20-23 loss, so it was still close. And the reason it was close is because I managed to get Swarmlord all the way to his lines. I charged Bobby G. I killed Bobby G.
Yeah.
Bobby G came back like the bastard he is. And then I think Bobby G backed off. They all backed off, and the combined shooting killed Swarmlord. But then Swarmlord exploded.
Nice.
And its exploding self killed Bobby G. The second time. So it was the just desserts that I needed. Just like I needed one thing, and that was it.
It's like the end of that movie everybody remembers, Hook, where like the giant crocodile falls on us. Basically, Swarmlord exploded and his teeth fell on top of Bobby G and ate him.
Yeah, so like that, it was just enough that gave it and I had killed his plane and stuff, so he had no real mobility left, and there was only 2 more turns, which means he couldn't get to my line. And ironically, the Rippers that were all I had left was Rippers, literally. 4 units of Rippers was all I had left.
The ultimate force of Tyranids.
Holding my objective, and 2 far to the side that he couldn't get, got my recon points and got my objective points, and basically held it out, so I only lost by 3. So not bad at all. My 5th game was against a guy named Mike Sanchez. Now, not only a great opponent, this was probably my favorite game of the tournament. This was like the most tactics-based game. It was against Imperial Guard, and he was pure guard. He had 3 Manticores. He was mostly Catachan, which was awesome. He had some like deep striking stormtroopers. What are they called now?
Are you talking about the Tempestors?
The Militarum Tempestus, yes. He had Tempestus Scions. So he had deep striking Tempestus Scions with plasma, which ironically 1 unit overwatched old One Eye and killed him.
Jeez.
That was real sad.
I mean, even just the guys with Hotshot Lass. Hotshot Lass is so good.
Yeah, I care about it a little less because all my stuff is T7.
Yeah, I know. I care about it more because my guys are T3.
But old one, I had 4 wounds left. He charged into some scions because I was like, they got plasma that overcharges and he can just give them orders to reroll ones and it's real bad. They need to die. So I charged them. He rolled super fucking hot and then wounded with everything. I failed with all my saves and just killed old one. Just like in Overwatch. It was so sad.
I mean, hopefully they got promoted to some sort of, super unit.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be, but give them a lot of medals.
All become scion leaders or whatever?
Yeah, I guess so.
But I ended up pulling out a win in the end because essentially once I was starting to go too far with the objective holding, I was holding 3 objectives a turn, so I was getting that bonus basically every turn, and I was also killing just enough that most turns I was 1 kill ahead. And the MVP was a single melee Carnifex that survived the shooting of 3 mana cores for 2 straight turns.
Wow.
And I mean, the rage was building. I could see poor Mike. I'm sorry, man, that Carnifex is now the new old One Eye.
He's been promoted.
He just would not die. It was insane. And I was only ever having 5-up saves because the mana cores are -2, and it was just 5 up, 5 up,
wow.
5 up, 5 up, 5 up. It's just what the fuck is happening? So it was great. That was a fantastic game, but I managed to pull out my my 3rd win with that one because I was 3-2 at that point. My last match was a man named Gustav Lidstad. I hope I said that correctly.
Maybe you did.
He's from Sweden. He came over with some friends from Sweden. He was running Custodes before Custodes.
Whoa.
So he was running...
He really was hey, I was Custodes before Custodes,
yes.
my friends.
He had a beautiful army, because Custodes are beautiful.
Man, Custodes, for a second, holy crap, guys, those models look incredible.
But he didn't have his Codex, because the Codex released after the tournament.
It released quite literally that day.
At the tournament, so he couldn't play with the Codex, which dramatically changes the effectiveness of that army, because he gets stratagems and all that stuff. It was really just down to, because it was a melee-on-melee army, it was who gets the charge in the center, how well does that combat go, and that's the game, basically. And what happened was I got the Alpha Strike on him. He underestimated Old One Eye a little bit, as most people do. Old One Eye took out an entire Custodia unit by himself.
Oh, man.
Which is real mean. He took out 7 Custodes before he went down.
Jeez.
So that's real nasty. Old Swarmlord did the Swarmlord thing. The MVP of that game was explosions. I'll say that again. Explosions. He had 1 Dreadnought.
What's our greatest weapon, sir? Explosions.
He had 1 Dreadnought and 1 Land Raider. And I had Swarmlord who could explode. All 3 of them exploded.
Nice.
All 3 of them exploded when the maximum amount of my units were around them as they exploded. And he rolled lots of 3 damage for the mortal wounds for those explosions. So when his Dreadnought exploded, it hurt everybody and killed Old One Eye. Then I charged his Land Raider exploded, and in the process of his Land Raider exploding, Swarmlord exploded and killed my Broodlord and put basically everybody else down to 3 or 2 wins.
That's amazing.
And then the MVP for him was his last Custodia unit in the back. I charged with a 4-wound melee Carnifex, the Death Leaper, and the Red Terror. The Red Terror failed his 4-inch charge.
Ooh.
And then Death Leaper and the 4-wound Carnifex got killed in Overwatch with their bolt pistols and their bolt spear things.
My goodness.
It was just well, that just happened. Am I going to lose now? Because, Swarmlord was dead, Old One Eye was dead, all my melee Carnifexes were dead. All I had left was the 2 shooty Carnifexes, 3 Zoanthropes, and, a Neurothrope.
And the Rippers, the linchpin of your army.
The Rippers were everywhere, yes. He would have had a hard time killing all the Rippers, but... I thought, man, I'm not going to table him now because he basically just killed in Overwatch all the things that would kill him because obviously he then just charged the Red Terror and just punked and just the shit out of the Red Terror.
Messed him up, yeah.
Because it's Custodes and they have the charge. But all in all, awesome opponents, great tournament, learned a lot, fucked up real bad in a couple games. But I had a blast, and NIDs are super fun again.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can just recap in total. It was a lot of fun. We can't recommend it more. Go to LVO next year if you get a chance.
Yes.
And some future tournaments coming up, which maybe we can try to head out to a couple more, because I really did enjoy this.
Yes. You got, I think, Broadside Bash, Barrier Open, some others.
SoCal
tournament.
There's quite a few out there. Obviously, the big ones, Nova, Adepticon, and a bunch of things. So we'll have to see what we can get out to this year.
Yeah.
But all in all, really, really fun. Sorry if this episode went a little bit longer than usual, but we wanted to really get in and give you guys the full recap of our time at LVO.
Status, where's the game currently?
Where is the game currently at? For us who are just so knowledgeable in this
also,
game and give, and know the most because we do so well.
Probably also ran long because literally we've got off the plane got a ride here and then just started recording.
And we just started recording immediately. So again, sorry we're not able to recap the results of the top 8. We have our theories, but as we all know, Jeff Poole won the whole darn thing.
Jeff Poole!
So good job, man. Either way, kudos to everybody in the top 8. They absolutely earned it. All killer, fantastic players. So can't wait to see what 2018 brings for the meta, especially with those new codexes.
Oh, yeah, dog.
Kind of last thing we can do before we round out the show is to give a little bit of news about our show. Now with the new year, we're trying out a little bit of a different format. 2 things to announce. We're going to be changing when episodes are coming out. We're going to be kind of staggering episodes, meaning we're actually going to be, for the time being, we're going to sunset 40K Arena.
Yes.
Look, some stuff happened at work in Kimura. The Dark Eldar were a little frustrated with us. They put us on leave for a little bit because, we kept saying...
Well, we're not supposed to talk about it.
No, we can't talk... Okay, that's true. That was part of the agreement that we signed.
It was like a blood contract.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It was in our blood.
Yes.
So, look, we might come back to 40K Arena. We're taking a break from it for right now.
Yes.
But what we're actually going to be doing is bringing in another episode of Roll to Seize, this regular show. It won't be the exact same of building a list and Seize of the Month. We'll add in some new segments. But if you guys actually have some ideas of what you'd like to hear from that extra episode of Roll to Seize every month, let us know. Shoot us an email. Let us know what you guys would like to hear us talk about. Is it talking about some of these competitive things like we talked about on this episode? Is it something completely different that we've never talked about? We'd love to hear from you guys. And also the structure we're going to start playing with. It might not be February. It might start in March. We're still figuring out when we're going to do it. But as you know, we also have each month 2 episodes of Dark Heresy. Well, we're looking to do an episode of Dark Heresy, then a episode of Roll to Seize, then the third week, another episode of Dark Heresy, then the last week, an episode of Roll to Seize. So you guys can have a little bit of variation. You don't have 2 big episodes at once if you only listen to one segment and then a huge gap between the next episodes. This, we think it helps break up the month a little bit better, but let us know your thoughts.
This was more along the lines of also the comments from our fans that were saying specifically having the 2-week gap, or in some cases with the long months, 3-week gap between the oldest episodes of Dark Heresy and the newest episodes of Dark Heresy.
As well as Roll to Seize too, being in those longer months, just being at the 5 weeks before they hear another episode.
It was too much time between it. And so we're trying to reorganize it so it's a little bit more even-paced.
And also, with 8th edition, there's so many more releases and so many new things to talk about that having a second Roll to Seize episode, we felt made sense because there's just so much stuff. I mean, we haven't even talked about in this episode what's happened since, which is the Custodes stuff, the Thousand Suns stuff, and the Chaos Demons, which we didn't even talk about, which feels like a lifetime ago, but that was just the beginning of this month. So much is happening all the time. So we're going to add in more content. And otherwise, guys, thanks for joining us for our 43rd episode of Roll to Seize. We'll be posting a new episode of this segment every last Wednesday of the month, and soon, probably the second Wednesday, with episodes of Dark Heresy currently first and second Wednesday, soon to be first and third Wednesday. And if you'd like to download more episodes or check out other similar podcasts, head over to partialarc.com. You can email us any questions at rolltoseize@gmail.com and your ideas for our new episode of Roll to Seize and format ideas. Of course, you can always follow us on Twitter and Instagram for tournament and model picks at partialarc. Thanks for listening and see you on our next episode.
Goodbye.